And the more that I thought about it, the angrier that I got. Like, look at how hard I'm gripping this spatula right now. That's how angry I was while I kept on reading this book. Welcome to another episode of Cook and Book, where I cook very badly while I talk about books. As per usual, I'm doing a bunch of book giveaways. The first two books that I am giving out are A Promised Land by Barack Obama. I got a copy of this when I did a Q&A with him for Goodreads. His team sent me the book to prepare the questions. It is a very thick boy. The other book that I'm giving out is White Tears, Brown Scars, How White Feminism Betrays Women of Color. I got this book from the publisher, so I will also be giving it out. I read this book this month, so I will talk more about it in a little bit. And as always, I'm doing another Book of the Month giveaway because they are the sponsor of today's video. Book of the Month is a super popular and fast-growing online book service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors to help readers discover books that they love. So every month, their team vets hundreds of books and curates together a selection of new and early release titles so that you can spend less time researching and more time reading. You can skip any month, anytime, and you will not be charged. And I am doing a giveaway for the 5 brand new books that they have selected this month. They include The Final Revival of Opal and Nev, which is a historical debut that's about rock and roll and black feminist punk spirit. What's Mine and Yours, which is a literary novel that follows the lives of 2 families in a divided southern community. Too Good to Be True, which is a creepy thriller with a bunch of unreliable narrators. And A Book Club Far Away, which is an early release contemporary about estranged friends reconnecting to heal past wounds. And The Lost Apothecary, which is an urban fantasy book that would personally be my choice for the month because it's about an apothecary who secretly sells poison to women who want to kill men for revenge. The giveaway details will be in my description below, but if you want those 5 books guaranteed, you can go to the link in my description and use my code READWITHCINDY to get your first box for $9.99. Let's move on to what I am cooking today, which is Southwest plant-based protein over cilantro rice. So the first thing we're gonna do is thinly slice 1/2 of the onion while dicing the remaining onion into 1/2 inch pieces. It's so fitting that I'm slicing some onions today because the first book that I read this month was Ties That Tether, which is a book that made my friend Chanel very teary-eyed. She said that she really saw herself in this book and saw her culture represented, and that was really why I picked up the book in the first place. It is a contemporary romance about a Nigerian woman who, for the longest time, had this pressure placed upon her by her family to marry a Nigerian man and preserve her culture. When she was younger, her dad was dying, and on his deathbed, he literally said to her, "Promise me you will never be with a white man," which is so wild because I actually plan on saying the same thing to Chanel when I'm on my deathbed. So I was like, oh my god, we're getting so much representation for you and me. All jokes aside, it's kind of a shitty, guilt-trippy situation to be in because she's not really living her life for herself. She's just living her life based on her parents' wishes. But the plot really begins when she has a failed date with this Nigerian dude who turns out to be super sexist. After the date, she goes to this bar and then she meets this white guy and they just hit it off. So she ends up having a one-night stand with him, which she has never done before, and she's never even been with a white man, but it is fucking awesome. Like, that dick must have been good because she's still thinking about him, but she thinks it was just like a one-time thing. It'll never happen again until, through certain circumstances, she does end up having him back in her life again, and their relationship ends up evolving into something way more serious. It's less of a romance and more about focusing on this main character trying to figure out, is it worth fighting for her happiness or should she be a compliant daughter? Chanel rated this 5 stars because she loved it so much. I am gonna stick with a solid 3. I do think I read it at a good time because February was just a roller coaster of a month for me. I was going through a depressive episode. I was just feeling really sad and having a lot of dark thoughts. So having this book was kind of a nice escapism for me because it gave me this fluffy little romance, and she is so lucky that the guy she ended up having a one-night stand with turns out to be this really solid, loyal dude who's ready to like ride or die for her. This is one of those things where it's all about the timing and your state of mind when you read a book, because I think if it were any other time, I would have been like, this shit is not realistic. Men like him don't exist. But because I was in a very fragile, vulnerable state, I was just reading it being like, oh my god, I wish I had a Raphael in my life. He's too perfect. It's unrealistic. But you know what? I am very depressed and I kind of need this escapism right now. I really loved the scenes where the love interest gets to discover Nigerian food and they kind of learn about each other's cultures, and also like the way way that you have to eat the food too because of all the customs. It made me super hungry and I want to try out all the food. I would guarantee you it would be much better than whatever shitty thing I'm cooking right now. Next, it says I have to zest and half the lime. I don't know how to zest lime, so I'm just gonna cut it. And then I'm gonna dice the poblano and dice the tomatoes. The main issue that I had with this book was the relationship developed way too fast. It starts off as a one-night stand and it goes from 0 to 100. Literally, the relationship develops faster than the government distributing vaccines. This is supposed to be the dude that is the catalyst for her to question everything about following her mom's wishes. Because if she goes with a white dude, her mom will disown her. So you're telling me that you slept with this dude for a one-night stand and now things are escalating and you're willing to risk it all, throw away your family and your culture just to be with him? I don't think anybody's dick is that good. Her decision is supposed to represent her following her heart. But again, this is some dude that you literally just met. You don't even know the guy. We didn't even get to see the relationship properly develop to have any solid foundation for why they should be together. He's really sweet and he seems like an amazing, decent guy, but we didn't have any time for them to actually interact and develop a meaningful connection because everything just happened so quickly. I'm de-seeding the poblano peppers right now, and my method of doing that is literally just grabbing the seeds, ripping it out, and throwing it in trash. Speaking of seeds and looking within ourselves, the next book that I read was Vibrate Higher Daily, which is a very short nonfiction book. I guess it's considered self-help, but it didn't really help much. I followed the author on Instagram and she has a lot of inspirational quotes that she often posts on Instagram and Twitter. You know I'm a depressed bitch when you see me constantly liking and sharing motivational quotes. That's how you know I'm going through shit. She is a spirit practitioner and her book is supposed to be a guide on how to live with more intuition and confidence. Or in her words, vibrate higher daily. And I'm not even gonna bother to make a perverted joke with that. I'm sure the comments on this video will do the job on their own. She talks about vibes and vibrations so much throughout the book. Once again, I apologize for my chopping skills, but this is really how I chop veggies. I rated this 2 stars because I just did not get anything from it. She doesn't give any concrete examples for how to vibrate higher daily. And if she does, it's very generic examples that you can find anywhere, like journaling, eating healthy, surrounding yourself with positive people, avoiding toxic people. We all know this already. The difference is that when she describes all of these things, she keeps talking about the vibes. Like if you eat healthy, that's how you know you're creating good vibes. It gets a little too woo-woo for my taste. After that, I read a dystopian novel called Lakewood. The main character is a college girl who recently had her grandma die, so she and her mom are really strapping on cash because health insurance is fucking expensive, dude. If you live in America, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. So they had to pay for like the funeral expenses, they had to pay for the healthcare for when the grandma was sick for so long. One day she finds this job posting. The job is a secret program where they're looking for patients to do research on and do experiments on to develop new medicine and technology, but it has to be super top secret. Anyone who participates in the program has to sign an NDA where they can't share what they're actually doing to their friends and family. The plus side is that it's very high paying. They get to live in this facilities. It's a free place to live. There's no out-of-pocket medical expenses. They'll get taken care of. They just can't tell anybody what they're actually doing. And that is shady as hell. You should never agree to be experimented on and have to sign an NDA where you can't tell anybody that you were experimented on. But I get it. She was desperate for money. She did what she had to do. And that's the thing. A lot of these patients who end up in these programs like that are the type of people who are desperate for money. And usually lower income people are people of color. So the research is like a lot of weird shit, like an eye drop that turns her eye clears blue, medication that cures dementia. There's like this golden pill that will make all your bad thoughts go away. I would be interested in that because Prozac ain't working. I rated this 3 stars. So I was interested in the premise and the subject. I just don't know if I'm into the execution of it. I think that if you like Catherine House, then you might be interested in this book. A lot of the book felt like a fever dream. Like you didn't know what the fuck was going on. Everything was just super confusing and bizarre and unsettling. It's very abstract. You don't really get any answers for what is actually going on, which is basically like Catherine House, but on a whole nother level. But for me, I would have liked it differently. I found a lot of the events to be repetitive. I wish that the plot progressed more so you weren't just seeing the same awful shit happen over and over. But you could argue that maybe that was the point, because that was literally the experience for the main character, where she had no idea what was going on. She's just stuck in this haze of wild shit that happens to her. No plot, just bad vibes. The author of the previous book I read would not approve. So with my bowl of sliced onion, I am going to add juice from half the lime, 1 teaspoon sugar, and 2 teaspoon water, and a little bit of salt. Ooh, how very fitting that I'm gonna add salt, because the next book that I read is the worst book that I have read so far this year. The book is Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. I legit thought I was gonna rate this 4 stars when I first read it, and I ended up rating it 1 star. The book essentially examines our interactions with strangers and why they often go wrong. And the way that he frames this book is that he starts and ends with the case of Sandra Bland. If you don't know, she was a woman who got pulled over by a police officer, and that officer got super aggro with her, and he ended up arresting her and yelling at her too, and saying things like, "I will light you up." And when she was in jail, she allegedly committed suicide. We don't know if she actually did or if there was some tampering with. The point is, her death could have been prevented. It would have never happened if this police officer hadn't stopped her and been so aggro with her and treated her so terribly. Essentially, he looks at all of these very prolific cases and he tries to dive into why this miscommunication happens. And in my opinion, he did it very, very terribly. Now we gotta head over to the stove. First, you're gonna heat a drizzle of vegetable oil over the pan. Oh my God, that was not a drizzle, my bad. You're gonna add plant-based ground protein, and honestly, oh my God, that was a big splash. Then you're gonna add some Southwest spice. The recipe says you're supposed to flatten it with a spatula, but I'm just gonna go ahead and break it into pieces.
Cut my life into pieces. This is my last resort. Suffocation, no breathing. Don't give a fuck if I cut my arm bleeding.
Whenever I fry food on the pan, it gets too loud for the audio, so I'm just gonna go ahead and continue my thoughts on the book in like a split screen kind of style. You'll still see that I'm cooking protein on the side. You cook it for about 3 to 4 minutes before you add another drizzle of oil and then poblano and onions. Essentially, the book is arguing that there is something wrong with the tools and techniques that we use to communicate with people, especially with people that we don't know. And because we're approaching it the wrong way, that invites conflict and misunderstanding. 90% of his book hinges upon taking very popular, prolific cases. But the problem with taking these big cases like Sandra Bland or Brock Turner or Jerry Sandusky is that they deal with a lot of sensitive subjects like pedophilia or rape or police brutality, and he doesn't deal with them sensitively. He doesn't deal with them with any nuance. He just generalizes the situations so that they fit under whatever science he's trying to push out, and you're way oversimplifying it. He was just glossing it over as miscommunication, and I had a huge problem with that. And the more that I thought about it, the angrier that I got. Like, look at how hard I'm gripping this spatula right now. That's how angry I was while I kept on reading this book. I'm gonna dive into these topics, so if any of what I mentioned is triggering to you, please go ahead and skip over to the next book. Let's start with Sandra Bland, because he started the book with her and he ended the book with her, and he used her case as the framework for this entire book. He mentioned some interviews that the police officer did where the officer admitted that he was afraid for his life, and Malcolm Gladwell explains that it is because he had misread Sandra Bland's social cues. Because when he first pulled her over, they kind of had a tense conversation. She was irritable with him, very reasonably so, because he didn't really have any reason to pull her over. So she was annoyed about it because she was just trying to get through her day. This cop stopped her over and now she has to deal with this bullshit. And so the cop misread her social cues and thought she was being more of an aggressor and could potentially be a danger. Although Malcolm does say that the police treated the situation very poorly, he also says that he believes that the officer genuinely felt like he was afraid for his life. Why is it that Malcolm Gladwell can go into detail about how he didn't understand her social cues properly, but not go into detail about how these misreadings of social cues happen more frequently to Black people? If you're ignoring race in the situation of police brutality, you are not reading the situation properly. It's not just two strangers in the neighborhood who don't know how to read each other's facial cues. It is two people who represent a systemic issue that's been happening for a long time because of racial oppression. There's another section that he devotes entirely to drinking culture. And the example that he uses for this is Brock Turner and Chanel Miller. Brock Turner was a student in Stanford who had raped Chanel behind a dumpster when she was unconscious. Chanel Miller wrote a really good memoir called Know My Name, where she goes into detail about the entire trial, where a lot of the lawyers and Brock Turner tried to justify this as a product of drinking culture, where he was under the influence and he didn't know what he was doing and that she had wanted it, so he misunderstood and then this happened, which is obviously not true. Or is it? Because in Malcolm Gladwell's book, he literally said in this quote that I had to write down because I was in such disbelief, Brock Turner had to make sense of a stranger's desires and motivations. That is a hard task for all of us under the best of circumstances. Asking a drunk and immature 19-year-old to do that in the hyper-sexualized chaos of a frat party is an invitation to disaster. Bitch, what? Yeah, you can't make sense of a stranger's desires and motivations if she is fucking unconscious. If she's literally lying on the ground behind a dumpster, yeah, you're not gonna figure out what her desires and motivations are. Why are you saying that it's such a hard task for all of us under the best of circumstances? It's not hard. If she's unconscious, you don't rape her. The case was never about consent or drinking. It was about power. He wanted to have sex with a woman no matter how long it would take, as you can tell from his repeated attempts until he found an easy target who was literally unconscious for him to take advantage of her. Also, rape doesn't happen because you were drinking too much or because you misread social cues. Because if that were the case, alcoholics would be rapists, but they're not. Lots of autistic people are not able to read social cues as well as the average person. But you don't see them committing these crimes, and it's super damaging to frame an abuser and an assaulter and their victim as just two strangers who had misunderstandings of each other. Usually the person who is in that position of power or is the abuser does not care enough to understand their stranger in the first place. When people get assaulted or when people get killed by the police, their motivations or the way that they communicated or whatever was not part of the equation at all. When you apply this very flimsy sociological science onto the systemic issues that actively harm women and people of color, it puts them on the same playing field as the people who abuse them, and it takes away the damage that was actually inflicted upon them. I'm not gonna get into what he talked about with Jerry Sandusky and what Jerry did to all of those kids because I really don't want to get into the trifecta of shitty takes, so we are not gonna dive into that. Anyway, let's take a food break, shall we? Because this has got me all heated up, just like my pan, which has finished cooking the protein, onions, and poblano peppers, so now I'm adding the Tex-Mex paste. So with this brown paste that I'm adding, the next book that I read is White Tears, Brown Scars, which is a nonfiction book that talks about how white feminism damages women of color, specifically brown women. The author does talk about other races like black women and Asian women, but because the author is Middle Eastern, she did more of a focus on Middle Eastern women and indigenous women, which I really liked. I feel like we don't really get to focus on that when it comes to racial discourse. I ended up rating it 5 stars. I think it did a really good job of blending together the historical context for how these power dynamics came to be, while also showing modern day examples of the ways that white women oppress or just shut the door behind women of color. She talks about how white women used to fight in court in order to keep their slaves. She talks about the concept of maternal colonialism, which is when white women would steal indigenous children away from their families to raise them instead. And obviously there are modern day examples like Barbecue Becky or white women on BookTube who attacked me, an Asian booktuber, because they thought I was oppressing the romance genre. So, you know, they truly have the range. There are a lot of points that she made that I really enjoyed. For example, she pointed out the dichotomy that women of color face, that whenever they don't fall within one stereotype, they become the other stereotype on the opposite spectrum. She brings out all these examples from different races. What stood out to me was when she brought out the examples of Asians. She points out the dichotomy between the China doll stereotype and the dragon lady stereotype. So essentially, if you are not a submissive Asian, aka a China doll, then you're seen as the more conniving and ambitious and power-hungry Asian, aka the dragon lady. It really reminded me of how when I entered BookTube, obviously I don't fit within the China doll stereotype because I'm not submissive or girly or anything like that. I started this BookTube channel as a hobby, and the channel grew really rapidly, and a lot of people misunderstood my intentions where they thought that I was deliberately trying to go big or go viral by purposefully picking bad books that I know I'll hate so that I can trash them. Or when I made fun of myself, they somehow thought that I was making fun of smaller booktubers, or that I was trying to take advantage of building a platform so that I could sell a book. It was just really bizarre for my intentions to be seen as conniving or ambitious or power hungry, like the dragon lady, instead of just someone who simply wanted to make videos about books, especially as someone who is like the only big Asian booktuber. Like, I don't think other people have had their motives or character questioned like that before. So I was like, much to think about indeed. Also, this really fucking sucks. Okay, so the main toppings in the pan are done, and then I had to quickly put together some stuff in the other bowl. In another bowl, I added the tomatoes to add salt and pepper and lime juice, but then I realized that there was really no point in adding the tomatoes in a totally separate bowl because I could have just put them on top of the dish anyway. So I don't know why HelloFresh was trying to make me do extra work, but they really just made me waste an entire bowl. In another bowl, I mixed together sour cream and lime juice and salt and pepper. And then for the separate onion bowl, I mixed sugar and salt together, and then I put it in the microwave for 30 seconds. So all the food is done. I went ahead and scooped some rice, put all the toppings on the plate. Oh my God, my hunchback looks so bad. Please disregard how ugly my spinal curve looks like and just appreciate the finished product instead. Now that the food is hot and ready, here's another hot and ready take I have to share from this book. I took a picture of this page and highlighted this paragraph because I was just like, fucking facts. So the context here is that the author is pointing out the double standards when it comes to how we treat rape when it comes to white women versus people of color. And she says, a white man raping a white woman is not a threat to white male power, and if it destroys or threatens to destroy the woman's life, then so be it. And this, I believe, is why, despite all our claims, our society still does not take violence against women seriously. When perpetuated by white men, frequently either such violence is ignored or the blame is heaped onto the victim. It is only when white women are violated or even imagined to be violated by non-white men that white society suddenly seems to find its moral compass. White women's tears have little effect on white men because the damsel was never intended to implicate white men. Interesting. One last quote that I'm gonna share. This happens in the last chapter of the book. She circles it back with talking about brown women again and how they get oppressed by white women, especially under the disguise of white feminism. And I found this so relevant because on the day that I finished this book, this was the day that Joe Biden and his team decided to bomb Syria. I actually saw tweets of white women celebrating his decision and saying that it was so great how he did it like quietly and he wasn't like Trump at all because Trump was such a buffoon, but at least he was able to bomb them in a very organized manner. In this book, the author points out that even though a woman has not taken the role of a president yet, there are still multiple white women who take leadership positions in the FBI, CIA, and Homeland Security, aka the organizations that are responsible for taking out brown people, statistically speaking. And she asks, what does it mean for the rest of us that white women can be in control of almost all of the weapons belonging to the world's most powerful country and still claim to be an oppressed group on the same level as other women? Fucking interesting. Much to think about indeed. Some food for thought, you could say. Anyway, this video is getting long, so I'm gonna quickly go over the last book, which is Wabi Sabi. This is a nonfiction book that describes the principles of Wabi Sabi, which is a Japanese aesthetic that's associated with Japanese tea ceremonies, and it's based on the belief that true beauty comes from imperfection. That's why you could say, I'm beautiful. I actually surprisingly found it to be interesting. It inspired me enough to actually jot down notes. I was inspired enough to kind of take that way of thinking and that aesthetic and try to figure out how I can translate it into my story. Because the author points out that there are certain imperfections like chips and bruises and scars and dents and peeling, but these are all testaments to histories of use and misuse. They add character to whatever the material you're dealing with. And I was like, ooh, that's actually kind of deep. So I'm gonna jot that down. But beyond that, I didn't really have any strong opinions on it. I rated it 3 stars. There's some photography interspersed between the pages to show you what Wabi Sabi means, but they're basically useless because they're so low quality that you don't even know what you're looking at. I got this as a gift from Jackie, that's why I have the book. But look at one of the photographs. Like, what the fuck am I even looking? This doesn't tell me anything about what Wabi Sabi is. And it's so short that I really didn't have any strong opinions on it. I also want to note that the author is a white man, and in the beginning of the book, he was saying he wanted to write this book and get this down so that he can bring more awareness to what Wabi Sabi is and save this Japanese philosophy from extinction, because I guess not a lot of people are leaning towards this kind of aesthetic and philosophy. And I was like, that's kind of weird that you're a white dude that wants to save an Asian philosophy that you were not a part of, but I'm not gonna get into that because this video is already too fucking long. So that's gonna be it for the video. Thanks for tolerating me. Unsubscribe from my channel. Goodbye.
We're living on the road.